Okay, we're here today for doing an interview for the Veterans History Project with Mr. Nick Guagliardo. He served on the USS Mackerel and the USS Loggerhead, both submarines during World War II. And I guess the first question is, how did you get involved in the military?
Well, I know, number one, most people, if they were healthy during World War II, had to go in. And I joined the Navy, and I'll tell you why I joined the Navy. When the Army was building up in 1940 and 41, I lived halfway between Camp Polk, Louisiana, and Camp Shelby, Mississippi. And these guys used to be driving through there on these long convoys, and when it come dark, they would just shut down and sleep alongside the road. They might take the canvas off these big old 6x6 trucks, and they would sleep on there with the chiggers and the snakes and all that stuff. And I said, boy, oh boy, I'm not that kind of a scout. So I'm going in the Navy. And besides, my dad was in the Navy. He was in the Navy before World War I. He was in and out. And he was willing to sign my papers. So, and I got out of high school when I was 17. But he wouldn't sign my papers until I was getting close to where I was going to have to register for the draft. So I went in the Navy.
And when was that about? About what year?
Okay, well, really, I joined the Navy December the 1st, 1942, because that's the day a law went into effect. And the law that said you was going to have to register when you turned 18. And when you registered, you would be subject to the draft. But you could pick. But if they needed somebody in a quota, to fill a quota, you were going. And I didn't want that to happen to me. So I was 17, I could join the Navy with my father's signature. So that's how I went. That's how I got into the Navy. And I went to boot camp in San Diego. And we had almost 12 weeks of boot camp then.
What camp was that? Do you remember what camp? The name of the camp?
Oh, well, it was in San Diego. I went, I don't know. It was like Camp Farragut was a detention center. Like you're in there for 3 weeks and you don't hardly get out of this detention area. And then I went to some other camp there. They called it camp, but really it's just part of the base, you know. And anyway, I spent over 11 weeks there, and I really enjoyed boot camp. A lot of guys didn't like it, but I enjoyed boot camp.
What kind of things they have you doing? Mostly physical activity. Physical exercise.
Like I saw these guys. We went out to this. What do you call it? Oh my goodness! I can't even think of the name of it. Obstacle course. We went out to. They said, "Well, we're going to the obstacle course." We go to the obstacle course. It says, "I just go through this thing. Like when you get down on that wall, that's just an 8-foot wall. You just got to go over it." I said, how am I going to get over that wall? But I saw these bigger guys that run in and hit that wall. Well, I ran and I hit that wall, and over it I went. I went over it the first time. And it really felt me. But I enjoyed the obstacle courses. And I went there was 7 guys from my hometown that joined the Navy at the same time I did. But 4 of them were 18. And they went to Great Lakes. But since I was 17, I don't know why, but my cousin and I and another kid were 17. They sent us to San Diego. Well, they swore those other guys in earlier than they did us. Well, anyway, when we get to boot camp, though, it's like 4 in the morning, and we're in here, and we got this guy that's been in the Navy a couple months longer than us, and he's talking tough and salty and everything, and he's telling us how to make up a bed and all that stuff, And he said, well, you're just going to be told one time. And so my cousin was a big old brute. He's like 6 foot tall, weighed 240 pounds. He was over 6 foot, weighed 240 pounds. And he says, Herbie, let me put you up in the crotch of that pole. See, this pole had things, and he puts Herbie up there, and Herbie says, hey, Corey, well, it's good to see you. This was a guy that went to high school with us, and he stayed in Hammond to finish high school, but his dad went over and was working for the Corps of Engineers in Mobile, and so he joined the Navy in Mobile, but wound up in our company in boot camp.
No kidding.
And he was in the band in high school, so they picked these petty officers, you know, to be platoon leaders, I think they call them. So Corey was a platoon leader since he was in the Hammond High School band. And so he drills us, you know, and this was a good thing. Like, I remember one day, he was a smoker. And us three guys that joined the Navy in Hammond, we were non-smokers. Well, he's out there in San Diego, and he says, Mr. Ray, all these men were giving me trouble today, and I think after chow tonight, I want to take them out on the grinder and run them. So we out there on the grinder, you know, and oh, he was puffing something terrible, you know. And I said, come on, Corey, step it up. You're not punishing these men. We got to keep going, you know. So I had a good time with that. Well, anyway, but he wound up going to Machinist School with me. Said a lot of these colleges had Navy training programs where you go in there and they teach you some kind of skill. Well, I wound up, Corey and I went to Machinist School at the University of Kansas, and that was a 16-week course. We went 16 weeks of machining. We even got so far as cutting helical gears, and I mean, it was quite a learning experience. And you know, there's one thing, there's two people there that I could never forget if I lived to be 1,000 years old. We had a physics professor, Demetrius. Now, I love this old man, but a lot of guys, they'd leave there and make fun of him. But there wasn't but one oil, and that was castor oil. It was any good at all for lubrication. But when he was going up, if you wanted a good oil, like all those old engines that flew in World War I, they had castor oil for a lubricant, you know. And this old man was still on that, and he says, don't eat ice cream, don't eat anything cold after a meal, because chemical reactions, the hotter it is, the faster it takes place. And when you put that ice cream in your stomach, you don't start digesting until you warm it up, you know. But I loved it. I love this old man's lectures. I remember he was telling us the most efficient steam engines are about 15%, and they'll never get any better. Well, right today, the most efficient engines in the world are these big power plants that are cooking steam at critical temperature and pressure.
Wow.
But see, this old man didn't ever think we'd have metals to take that, because, you know, he was born probably shortly after the Civil War.
Wow.
But anyway, I came out of that place as an E-4 Fireman First Class. They showed us some stuff on submarines up at this Machinist School. They showed us stuff. There was 200 men graduated every month, and they wanted volunteers, and they sent 5 every month. Well, they got about 20 volunteers. So to get us down there, and this really didn't make sense, but it's just something to eliminate you. They had a guy walk up in front of you, and then there's a pharmacist's mate standing in front of every one of these people. And he says, you're going to have to hold your breath for 1 minute, and you're going to have 3 tries. And then your 3 tries, you got to average a minute. Well, if you didn't make it the first time, you're not going to make it, you know. So the 5 that actually went, you know, they held their breath a minute. But of course there was more than 5 of us. So then they go to messing with your teeth. If you didn't have a beautiful set of teeth, you was out of there. You know?
Just any way they could to weed people out, huh?
Well, yes. But now, and you didn't see a head shrinker until you got to New London. Like, there was, 5 of us went, and only 3 of us went in submarines. And one of those went down in the Harder. Yeah, 2 of us survived the war, and he was on the Harder, and it was sunk. But anyway, you know something else. There was 5 guys from my hometown that made war patrols. and 3 of us came back. One of them was a lieutenant, an officer, reservist, and the other one was a Navy cook, you know. And he was in my class in high school, but he didn't make it back.
Wow.
I saw this guy Corey. This guy Corey was in a submarine repair unit out in Hawaii, and I saw him, and he told me, he says Gomez went down in a snook or something, whatever it was. And then I saw my cousin out in the Philippines, and he said, "Oh," he said, "Are you aware that Gomez went down? The war is over. I'm home on leave. It's November 1945, and I'm walking down the street in my hometown, and I says, and here comes Sidney Gomez. I says, 'Hello, Sidney.' And then I'm past him, and I realized what I'd said and who I spoke to. And I ran around back there, and I says, 'Sidney!' Boy, I grabbed it. He'd already passed me. He grabbed, and I says, 'Boy, I heard, Corey told me you went down in this boat, and Landry told me you went down this boat, and here you are. Boy, it's good to see you.' And he said, 'Well, yeah, I got off of it that run.' He said, 'I got transferred to so-and-so.'
And the boat went down after
And the boat went down, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, anyway, so you can imagine how I felt to speak to this guy, you know,
Sure.
when I went up, you know, and I knew he was dead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm at the New London, Connecticut. I volunteered, and I was in what they call Spritz's Navy for awaiting. You know, guys that had been to sea on surface vessels, they took them and sent them to submarine school quicker than they did us guys that didn't have any sea experience. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, I was in that thing 7 weeks, and you know but in that 7 weeks, you're really getting certain submarine training, because like one day they tell us, go down the Marine Railway. So we get down the Marine Railway, and we think we're going to work, you know. And I mean, so we was hanging out, and this chief walks up and says, "Follow me, men." Says, "You're from Spritz's, right?" "Yes, sir." So we go, and he says, "I want you to go up in these tanks." So we went up in these ballast tanks. Now see, this is just checking our heads. We went up in these ballast tanks while this thing was sitting in the Marine Railway. And this was a brand new submarine, and it was already smelled fishy in there. But this was a good learning experience for me, because that's where the air bottles were. The air bottle, you know, we carried like 150 gallons of air at 3,000 pounds pressure on those boats. Let's see. We carried 150 cubic feet. We carried 150 cubic feet. 150 cubic feet of air is what we carried, say. So that's really 8 gallons.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 8 gallons to a cubic foot, so it's a lot more than that. But anyway, otherwise I would have never seen those tanks if I hadn't been up in that tank. And you know, and you go down and they played with you. You know, like you got these machines, and you got all kind of stuff to eliminate you. And then you go before the head shrinker, and and another thing, when you were in Spritz's Navy, that's when you had the training in the diving tank. You know, we went out underwater and went up like you're escaping from a submarine, and we went into the McCain rescue chamber. You know, the thing that saved the guys that was on the Squalus when it was sunk in '39.
Was it a diving bell sort of thing?
We went in that. Yeah, we went in that. We were introduced to that thing while we were in Spritz's Navy. See, a lot of people had those experiences that didn't actually get in submarines, because, for instance, the day that I went in that tank, if I had a balked and going into those ballast tanks, I'd have been out of there. I'd have been heading for Pier 92 in New York. You know. You know, another thing, I did have a problem though. They put you in they have a tank that's probably, I'm going to say 7 feet in diameter maybe. And it's probably 10, 12 feet long. They put 12, 14 men in there. It's something like 6 or 7 on each side on benches. And then they're going to run the pressure up to 50 pounds. And they got a tender outside and they got a tender inside. And if somebody wants out of that thing, they got this door here, and they open this door, and because both sides is under the same pressure, they got like this is a big tank. You got a door here and a door here, and see they can let you out while these guys are still under pressure. Well, anyway, I think we did let a guy out of there, as I remember. But when they let the pressure down, see, it's hot, hot, hot in here, you know. And when they're letting the pressure down, you got all this sweat off these guys, and with all this water vapor in there, and it starts condensing. And it's a fog, like sitting from here to you, I couldn't hardly see. It's so foggy in there. But anyway, and the water slugs coming into my chest started bothering me, and I started coughing. And they was wanting to take me out of there, and boy, they wasn't about to get me out of there. But anyway, see,
So
I'd have been gone.
If you were taken out of there, you'd have been gone?
Yes. But anyway, when I went to sub school, I guess I made decent grades. And when I went to diesel school, I guess I made about the best grades. Well, you know, I went to sub school. It's only 6 weeks, and since I was in the machinist bunch, when you go to 8 weeks diesel school, and then you have 2 weeks of intensified evaporators, you know, what makes the fresh water, and refrigeration and hydraulics. And I made good grades, and they transferred me when I got out of there. I asked for new construction, and they put me on the Mackerel. And I was on that thing going on there 27th of December of 43. Then I was transferred off December the 1st of 44, going to the Loggerhead detail.
So you were on the Mackerel for almost a full year.
Well,
So, right?
11 months and 4 days or something
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
And now the Mackerel was where did that actually go on patrol?
Oh, hey, let me tell you something about the Mackerel. The Mackerel was a small submarine. We had 2 engines. We had 2 direct reversing engines. In other words, instead of the electricians maneuvering that thing alongside the dock, you know, with the electric motors, or, you know, reversing the propellers and everything, we did that in the engine room, because you had the camshafts on the engines were double, and they were machined where this big old cylinder could just shove them back and forth and to shift that camshaft, and you run it the other way. And you could do it just as quick as electricians could do the electric motors. But anyway.
So did the Mackerel did it go on to any tours?
Before I got on the Mackerel had actually been it had gone up to Newfoundland. I forget what they call that place. Argentina Bay. It went up to Argentina Bay and did something, and really this is before I got on there. And it went down to Norfolk, Virginia, and laid a minefield at the entrance to Norfolk, because see, it went in there and it laid a minefield in the daytime, but it was submerged. But in the daytime, and it went in there at night. So, you know, the Army is sort of responsible for, you know, the security of the country. So the Army had mine layers, but these mine layers looked like mine layers, you know. And if you had spies, they could see these mines. I mean, these mine layers, but they couldn't see the Mackerel laying mines.
How does a submarine lay mines? I've always wondered about that. How do they do that underwater?
You just spit them out. Well, how do you fire a torpedo? Same way.
Okay, so you just shoot them out the tubes.
Shoot them up with an impulse air. You know, like we fired our torpedoes with 200 pounds of impulse air. But I would imagine now I never was involved in mine laying, but I would imagine that they blew a huge bubble because see, we didn't blow a big bubble when we fired a fish, because we had a system to release that air. See, when that fish moved probably this far, a wheel came down, it was riding on it, and opened up this poppet valve, and it swallowed the air and a little bit of water.
So these mines, when the mines were being laid, the submarine would have all these mines on board,
Yeah,
obviously?
and in the stern, yeah.
And how would they be armed? Would you arm them? Were they magnetic mines, or were they activated by sound? Or
I can't answer that. I don't really know.
Okay.
But they had those mines. They had magnetic mines. They had sound mines, and of course, we wouldn't have been dishing out the one with the horns on them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess the horns are pretty touchy.
So you're on the Mackerel then for almost a year,
Yeah.
11
Now,
months.
now this boat was put in commission March the 31st, 1941. And it had the latest in fire control on it. So we took out officers, mostly. We took out senior qualified officers, and they had a team teaching them the latest in torpedo tactics. In other words, they read the patrol reports that come out of the Pacific, and talk to these people, and they call these people PCOs, prospective commanding officers. They were all lieutenants and above, lieutenant commanders and commanders, and a team came aboard with them, and our captain just stood over in the corner and watched things. But those people were allowed to operate, and we had a little target ship called the USS Sapphire. It belonged to some millionaire before the war, and he had loaned it to the Navy for the duration. And we fired torpedoes, practice torpedoes. We fired underneath that thing, and it was one thing. We always had good torpedoes, and the poor guys out in the Pacific didn't always have good torpedoes.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the little Mackerel really wasn't fit to go to sea and fight a war. Like, that boat down there at Muskogee carried 120,000 gallons of fuel. I went out in the Pacific. We used to say we carried 119,000 gallons of fuel, because I know that we could put that aboard. But on the Mackerel, it could only carry 26,000 gallons. And it had those two engines, and really they were antiquated when they put them in there. I mean, it was an antiquated design. And but we had the same fire control as they got down there on the Batfish in Muskogee. So we had the same, and that's what went out in the Pacific.
So the Mackerel was predominantly a training sub.
Yes, it was good for that. Very good for that. We probably didn't stay out that year I was on that thing. We probably didn't stay out overnight over 5 times. But we did a lot of night firing of torpedoes. A lot of night firing. We had 3 crews on there. But when we went out, we never carried for 2 crews, because it would make it too crowded. One crew always had stayed in,
Yeah.
So, but anyway, Manitowoc, when I got off the Mackerel, I went up to Manitowoc, and that was interesting. I put that boat in commission up there, and we cut ice. I mean, you could hear when we were going out to dive that thing, in February. You could hear we was cutting ice all the way out there and everything. But really, the ice wasn't too bad on it when we came back in. A lot of those boats, boy, they really would be covered with ice, But we didn't have that problem. And but I was a little disappointed in that I had to take it down the river. There was 13 people took it down the river, and I think 11 of us were enlisted men. And when we first were shaping up, everybody's there, and they get the machinist gang down in the classroom, and they says, "Okay, you guys, this is a good Liberty town. Lots of celebration, a lot of drinking." He says, "But I want to tell you something. The qualified men that make the worst grades is going to take this boat down the river." I was numero uno. And I was also numero uno. They told me, McKellar came to me and says, "You're going to take the boat down the river." I says, "Hey, I made the best grades." He says, "But you're from New Orleans." He said, "We'll give you a couple days off when you're down there." Well, see, these other guys are going to be off over a week.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, I'm glad I rode it down the river. Wonderful experience.
So you took it all the way down the Mississippi then?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
See, those boats, we took it down on our own. I mean, it didn't have hardly a fuel or anything in it. I mean, everything was just about pump dry.
Mm-hmm.
We took that thing down to Chicago, to the Navy Pier, where we didn't tie up. Two little tugs come out and met us, and one tug was actually dragging us, and the other tug on the stern was steering us. And we went through the Chicago River. Well, I guess it was about 1 o'clock in the morning when we started getting to Chicago River. We make all those turns, all those bridges had to come up. And in the Chicago River, we got in the Chicago Drainage Canal, and we went, and we were in the water. Our boat was in the water to Joliet, Illinois. When we were in that sewer canal, we were being towed, and we were actually floating in the water. And we get down to Joliet, and we went aboard a floating dry dock that only drew, with us, it drew 6 feet. 6 feet of water. We came to the Mississippi River.
Wow.
And then we did a lot of bumping, though.
Okay.
A lot of bumping, yeah. Or you could be laying in your bunk and you just shaking.
Now, in the bottom hull of those subs, is there a fin on the bottom of those, or what's dragging? Is it?
There's a key. Oh, hey, the boat was way the heck out of the water.
Uh-huh.
When we going down the Mississippi River, the boat is way up out of water, because you got this wooden. Well, it was steel dry dock, but some of those big dry docks were wood. But I'm pretty sure that ours was. You know what? I might have my wires crossed. I may have been on a wooden dry dock in New London, but I know I was on wooden dry dock and steel dry docks. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's beside the point. Mm-hmm. But what were we on before we? Oh, you asked me about the keel. Yeah, the boats have just a little bit of a keel hanging down there, but beneath the tanks. You know.
So the dry dock was actually dragging. It wasn't any part of the boat that was dragging bottom.
Oh no, it was a dry dock. Yeah. You know, this thing was just a little bit longer than the boat, and much wider. You know. And I know one morning I didn't feel any movement. You know, I woke up and I run topside and I look and I go and I went over on the wall of the dry dock, and we were tied up to a cottonwood tree, and the cottonwood tree just over the levee was a cotton field, and it hadn't been picked clean. You could still see cotton, and this was in February. Well, this was in March, and you could see cotton left over from last year. But the reason we were in this cotton field was because it was foggy, and so they tied it. Well, we wasn't in the cotton field. We could see it though. Mm-hmm. And I was really surprised though in the Illinois River, the amount of industrial stuff that was along the river. They were building all kind of small vessels for the Navy. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was really. See, and I didn't dream it. You know, I figured vessels are made, you know, next to the sea. Right. You know, like down in New Orleans, they made all these vessels. Like we had this. What was the name of that outfit down there?
Oh, they made the Higgins boats?
Higgins, yes.
Yeah.
Higgins.
Yeah.
Have you read the book about Higgins boats?
No, I don't think I have.
Yeah, okay.
I know that the D-Day Museum down there is built where the Higgins boats were built. You know, there's the D-Day Museum that Stephen Ambrose put together.
Yeah.
Is down there where the Higgins boat factory was, supposedly. That's the way I understand it. But so.
Oh, it's not in downtown New Orleans.
It's not.
Oh, hey, I don't know. I've never
Oh.
been there. I thought it was in downtown New Orleans. Now you're telling me it was where they built the boats.
The D-Day Museum is in downtown New Orleans. It is.
Okay.
It's right there by the river.
Okay.
And from what I understand, maybe it's nearby where the Higgins boats were made, but the Higgins boats factory was right around that area. I
Okay.
think. So.
Well, let's talk about this when the interview is over.
Okay.
Okay. Where were we?
So, well, you basically on your way down to New Orleans with the Mackerel.
Yeah.
Or with the Loggerhead,
Yeah.
right?
Loggerhead.
Yeah.
And well, I get down there and I got my 2 days off. I tell you, one thing interesting there. In New Orleans, a couple of our guys was bar hopping, and they would started drinking with a couple of girls. And what do you girls do? Where do you work? I said, oh, we're oyster shuckers. What do you mean by that? And so they says, we take oysters, we take this knife and take oysters out of shell. And we put them in cans, gallon cans. Really? I said, hey, it's right around the corner, we'll show you. So they went around the corner and they showed them. And one of those guys was a cook. He tells the commissary officer the next day, he says, about those girls and those oysters. Well, let's go get some of those. Okay? So they went around there, they got a vehicle, and they, had to ride the ferry over to New Orleans, and they went down to this place, and the guy says, you guys can't afford oysters. He says, well, we get 50% more money to eat on than the regular Navy does. And he says, well, really, even with that, I don't think you can afford it. He says, why do you get more? Who are you to get more? He said, we're submarine sailors. You go to sea on those things? Yes, sir. He said, I tell you what, these cans cost me 50 cents. And I'll give you all the oysters you want for 50 cents a gallon. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
And boy, listen, we had fried oysters at sea. I sure enjoyed them. But anyway, I thought that was a good deal. The people in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, I think it was called White House Dairy. Every submarine that left there, they gave them all the canned milk. Like they canned milk for Pet Milk Company, and they had it on their own label, But anyway, they gave us all the canned milk we wanted and all the ice cream we would take. So that was a pretty good deal.
Wow, that's a good deal.
Yeah. But anyway, we left New Orleans, went down to Panama. And down at Panama, see, we'd never fired a torpedo. When we left New Orleans, we had hot torpedoes, though. We go down to Panama and we get practice torpedoes. Well, I guess we had some hot and some cold, But, and we I don't know, we hung out down there for a couple of weeks, I guess. And we were at the Peerless Isles. Now, I was quite an experience. I never heard depth charges from the enemy. But as an introduction to depth charging, the destroyer run alongside of us, like 100 yards over, and dropped 3 of them, I think. And hey, let me tell you what happened. When we come back in that afternoon, there was a landing craft met us when we dropped the anchor, and there was 3 guys held up, 3 big old sea bass, about 30 pounds apiece. And it says, this is compliments of Captain so-and-so. In other words, he was the head of this little flotilla out there. We had a couple of destroyer escorts. See, we was in a little thing surrounded by these little islands, the Peerless Isles, and there was deep water in there. But anyway, they we anchored every night. We didn't operate at night. Well, we fired the guns at night, and we may even fire practice torpedoes at night. But we did go in and anchor every night. But anyway, this day we come in broad daylight after the depth charging, and these guys held up these big fish. And you know, that was a memorable meal. That cook sliced those things where he had about a pound steak, you know.
Wow.
And he baked them in the oven, and it was a fabulous meal, you know. And you know, and it was free, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But those poor fish got depth charged, you know. And no telling how many fish they killed. And those guys just picked up probably 3 bags. Well, hey, of course, they eat those from every boat. Every boat, they went out there and picked up afterwards, you know. But this time, I guess that captain says, give those guys those 3 largest ones. Well, anyway, we won every submarine that left Panama. I don't know whether this was late in the war, early in the war. But late in the war, when you left Panama, a submarine, they would let it leave there with 10 cases of booze, 10 cases of bourbon or whatever. And so we took on our 10 cases of bourbon. And this is bought with our whatever fun, you know. We had some money to party on and stuff. Well, anyway, we had a gun pointer that we inherited off of the narwhal. And the narwhal had 6-inch 53 bag guns. You know, well, these are cruiser guns. All those 4-stack cruisers had the same guns that the Argonaut, Narwhal, and Nautilus had. They were 6-inch 53s. Those things shot about a 95-pound or 100-pound projectile, and you put a bag of powder in behind it, you know. Well, anyway, these guys, we had a good gun pointer. Well, anyway, he hit this. We went by there one day with a thornback and fired 20 rounds. They fired 20 rounds. Well, they missed it a time or two. We hit it 20 out of 20. And then, so the skippers, we're leaving. We're going to Pearl the next day. And the skippers was boozing it up. And this guy off of Thornback said, you know, you guys have been lucky. I'll bet, if with the permission of our crews, I will bet you my 10 cases of booze to your 10 cases of booze, that guy will whip you guys with that 5-inch today. So we shot at that little rock, we hit it 20 out of 20, and they missed it. They got it 19 out of 20. Well, the first thing we did when we got to Hawaii was they got a vehicle and went over to Thornback and got their 10 cases of booze. So when we left Hawaii on the Loggerhead, we had 20 cases of booze aboard. Now, when you went topside, like the 2 men that would go topside to change the ballast, the fuel ballast tanks over to ballast tanks. In other words, we had used all the fuel in these ballast tanks, so now we're going to use them as ballast tanks. And when you do this, it'll raise us up just a little bit more, and we'll use less fuel and get a little bit better speed. Well, when these people came back below, they got a double shot of booze. Anytime you risk your when you went topside on business, they give you a double shot of booze. Well, in the gun, twice. I was on the gun crew. I was a 5-inch ammunition handler, and I was the smallest guy. And well, anyway, I don't remember the first time. Oh, I do too. We went into. We had lifeguard duty off of Hong Kong, and you know, this is where we're gonna pick up the Airedales if they got shot down or had engine trouble. Well, anyway, we had gotten down there a few days to spare, and they had this thing called Gap Rock. It was a lighthouse, and the Japs had built a radar station there, and our old man decided that we was going to take it out. So we fired 54 rounds into that thing. The 54th round went in that place, and I'm telling you, you could see that it was made out of big old stones, and we must have hit there or something. It just exploded because that little old shell, we was hitting it at about 4,000 or 5,000 yards, and you could see just a little flash when we had hit that lighthouse. But boy, this time that thing opened up with all that big blaze,
Wow.
and down it came. But anyway, we fired 4 more rounds on the island, and we left there. But like when I went down below, you had to march past wherever and get your double shot. Ooh, and I had to go back on. Both times I got booze, I had to go back on watch. But I went to another time. We fired 10 torpedoes at a. I shouldn't tell this for history. But anyway, we were in oh my goodness. We were in a wolf pack, and our old man was SOPA. So we went in first. The Japs had 6 or 7 ships anchored at submarine Java. And we went in there, and he fired 6 forward fish going in, and when we were leaving, he fired 4 stern fish. None of them went off. And the lizard fish was behind us, and they had 16 fish forward and 4 electric fish aft, just like we did. And our old man told him, he said, if your steam fish don't go off, don't fire your electrics, just get out and go. And the Bacuna was back out there, and he called them on the TBS, talk between ships. He called them and told them, he said, don't even come in and make a run, because your fish not going to go off. But we fired 16 torpedoes there that night, not a one of them went off.
Well, why do you think that is?
Well, like the next day, afternoon meal, he told the captain gets on the horn and he says that he thinks that they had very strong nets. In other words, in these nets, let those fish go in so far, and they don't have enough impact to set off the the detonators, the trip mechanism.
Wow.
But anyway, when you go down, and when we came out of there, here comes a sub chaser, and somehow or another, he got after us, and he was firing at us with something like a 37 or 40 millimeter. It was an automatic weapon, but it's very slow firing, And so we would fire at him, but we didn't do any good. He didn't do any good. Since I'm here, he didn't do any good. But anyway, you go down below and you get your whiskey. But when we got down to Australia, though, we had they issued everybody a bottle of booze. But down in I got off that thing down in Australia. I had a problem with with a chief engineman. Now he was a fuel king. The fuel king on a submarine is the man that makes reports every day on how much fuel that he has on board, and I think he also reports on battery water and things. He makes this report every day, and he's the guy. Really, he changes those things over. Those, the valves I was telling you about. But on the first boat I was on, I was a fuel king for 4 or 5 months, maybe longer. And I guess that may have been in my record. I don't know. But when we were going to take on fuel, well, at Subic Bay, they said, I was going to have the watch from, say, 12 o'clock until 8 at night, if we had been at sea, or my section like would have in the deck watch and the below decks watch. Okay, since we had that, they assigned me. They came to me, the engineering officer, and says, "You got to fuel this thing while Garrett is going over to the beer party." And when he comes back, he'll be in charge. Well, we didn't take on any fuel. When Garrett and that bunch, well, the two sections left, you know, like, what, 50 enlisted men. They leave the boat to go over to drink their 4 beers or whatever it is. And I'm checking up. I said, "What's the name of that tender over there?" I was reasonably sure that I had a cousin, this cousin that I went to boot camp with me. He was on the Gilmore, and I was pretty sure that was a Gilmore over there. So I asked when he's signaling. He said, "Yeah, that's the Gilmore." So I went to the duty officer, and I says, "Hey, that's the Gilmore over there, isn't it?" He said, "Yes." I said, "I have a cousin over there. I'd like to go over there and visit him." And he says, "Oh, we got a problem here." He says, "You'd have to know his serial number and blah, 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 blah." And I says, "Hey, his serial number is 645-8261. How would you know that?" And I said, "Mine is 62. We joined the Navy together." And he just called this guy. He called this quartermaster over there and says, "Get this information from him, and I'm going to write this up, and I want you to send it to the Gilmore." And it sent back, it says, "Have him spend the night, you know, and go back in the morning." So, when I'm coming back in the morning, who is on this launch with me but Garrett? I don't know where Garrett was. But Garrett didn't go back aboard to take on that fuel. Somebody else had to take on that fuel. Because I was gone and he wasn't there. And we left Subic Bay with 11,000 gallons short. Bad.
Oh, man.
And this guy tells me, he says, "You know, I was with the captain before." And he says, "Really?" He says, "They're going to want to give you a summary court-martial." He says, "But I think I can talk him into a deck." And I says, "Garrett, you're not going to talk me into anything." I says, "I'm not going to stand a court-martial on this ship. I'll take a court-martial in Australia. I'll want a general court-martial in Australia. And you know what's going to happen? You're going to get your ass hung, because you might jimmy the signal log on this ship, but you're not going to jimmy the signal log on a big old Gilmore." I says, "And you're going to get in trouble in Australia if they want to court-martial me." Well, so I knew then. I had no intention of getting off that ship. But after that deal, when we was approaching Australia, they want to know who wanted off, because see, they're gonna transfer 13 men. 13 men's going off of there. So I requested to be one of them. So I went into this relief crew, and I got my 2 weeks leave after the boat was refitted. When they came back, I went off on my 2 weeks, and I was put up in I was spent 2 weeks in the Wentworth Hotel. Let's say I had a bed, but 3 or 4 days, I don't know how long, but I went down to Bunbury, West Australia. I caught a train. That was quite an experience. It was about 100 miles, and it took you about 8 hours or longer to get there.
So let me get this straight. So you went over to another ship and to visit your cousin, and they had a record of that because you came over there.
Yeah.
And while you were gone, this other fella, Garrett, was supposed to have taken on the fuel that you guys needed while you were refueling, but he wasn't there either.
Yeah.
So they actually came in and fueled it up for you.
Yeah.
With nobody there. They didn't know how much to put in, right?
Well, no, you fill it you fill every tank full. You fill every tank full, but they just missed number 2.
Oh, they just missed
number. Now this was a small tank, 11,000 gallons.
So, so basically, he was going to try to pin it on you.
Yes.
And was there a protocol, like whenever you left the ship to go to the other ship, that he was supposed to have taken over?
Well, we wasn't. Yeah. Why? Oh yeah. Well, it was his job.
It was
He's
his
fuel
job.
king.
Oh, okay.
The fuel king is the fuel king. You know. I mean, it's him. He's got to make their fuel reports and everything every day.
Did you know? Did he get court-martialed then?
No.
He did not.
No. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Like at Chip's reunions, years later, I talked to an officer about that, and he said, "Oh, that was no." Oh, I was executive officer. I asked about it, and he says, there was nothing. He says, oh, we wasn't going to use all that fuel anyway because we knew what we were going to do. We were going to go mess around in the South China Sea and a little bit in the Java Sea and then head on out to Australia. Well, I'll tell you something. Going to Australia, I was very bitter at the captain of the Loggerhead for many, many years until I got this book. So right over there it says United States Submarine Operations World War II. He took us to Lombok Straits in broad daylight and let those people fire 3 rounds at us with a 6-inch gun, and I thought it was just him, but he was ordered to go through there on the surface.
Really?
Yes, and I didn't know it until I got this book in 1962.
Why?
Right.
Why did they have him go through on the
They
surface?
wanted. They said they wanted to see if the guns were still in operation.
So he was just running the gauntlet to get some
Yeah.
intelligence then, huh?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But I was very bitter about it, because of my ignorance. But the captain used to tell us a lot of things. For instance, well, I'll tell you that after get this thing off.
So then you got off the boat. You're in Australia.
Yeah.
At what point in the war is this now?
Oh, listen, I got off that boat June the 19th. June the 19th, 1945, we ended the patrol. And the war ended August the what? 15th?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, see? Just a month. And then we cleaned... we worked on a few submarines, and and I was, you move on a tender, and see, all relief crews lived on a tender, and we tore up. The contract was that we had to leave the base of the dock down there at Fremantle the way it was when the Navy was there. So we cleaned it up, and then September the 13th. September the 13th, I rode the Clytie. See, that was the tender that was there, the USS Clytie. I rode it back to the States. But we left there the 13th. But we cleaned that place up.
Wow.
But no, we come back to the States, and it was really nothing to do. And I got to leave. I went home on 20 days leave, and it was just nothing to do. I mean, we just didn't do anything. We're just waiting to get out of the Navy. But we went down to in January, I think it was, of 46. The Clytie went down to Philadelphia to have the bottom scraped, and we had to live on that thing. Here it is. It's out of the water, and it's like 15, 20 degrees in Philadelphia, and to go. I remember I'm sleeping in 2 sets of clothes. I had on my skivvies, underwear, and I had on 2 sets of dungaree trousers, 2 shirts, and by this time, there's all kind of bunks that's empty. So you get another bunk, you got blankets, but take a mattress off of a bunk and put on top of you, and then sort of hold it down with the mattresses to try to keep warm. It was terrible. I mean, how cold it was in that ship with it not being in the water.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
So when did you actually get discharged from the Navy?
February the 8th.
Of 46?
46, yeah. And they tried, this is something I want to tell you. When we were coming back to the States, they tried to get everybody to re-enlist, even if it was in the reserves, And we had one man that he was just telling everybody, he says, "Oh, I'm going to re-enlist." Well, he goes up to re-enlist, they won't have him. And so no one in my outfit re-enlisted because of this man. Let me tell you what the deal with this man was. He was on a 50 caliber machine gun, and they had sunk a Japanese ship. And they said they put along. They got these guys out in the water, and they're gonna pull some of them aboard for intelligence or whatever. And they said, "Stand by to pick up." And he starts chopping them up in the water. Okay, they had to beat him off the gun. But when they first hit port, they had quarters, and they awarded him a letter of commendation. A letter of commendation for the patrol before. And then the next day they had quarters, and they stripped the dolphins off his arm. We wore our dolphins down here. We didn't wear pins. Those pins didn't come out until the 50s. First they put those cloth dolphins on the chest, and then they come out with the pin. But anyway, this man's sin was that he was chopping those yaps up in the water. Now, other men, we had a man right here. He lived over in Sapulpa. By trade, he never worked as an attorney, but he was an attorney. But this man was on a 50 caliber, and he was ordered to chop up these Japs in the water, and he says, "I missed them all." He says, I steered that gun. Boy, I was sure pouring that lead in the water. But he said, I could not kill a man, and like that. But see, now CJ just was went little loony there and was chopping him up. But the Navy lost a good. But hey, let me tell you something. This man was valuable in that they didn't ship him off to surface craft or anything. They kept him right there in the relief crew because he was a good man in the engine room. They disqualified him from submarine, but they're not going to get rid of him. He's just not going to ride a submarine. But he's going to work on them, and if he's in that submarine crew, that relief crew, he's going to draw submarine pay. He's going to get paid.
Wow.
You know that we drew extra pay. Yeah.
Well, we've got about 3 minutes left on the tape. Anything you'd like to say in closing, or anything, or any, anything else you want to include?
Well, I don't know.
Anything else happen after that? You got out of the Navy.
Yeah.
What did you go on to do after that?
Well, let me tell you something about Navy pay. My brother, I had a brother. He was a aviation ordnance in the Navy, and he went in a year ahead of me, and he got out a month ahead of me, and he came out 2 grades ahead of me, and he and I both lived with our parents for about a year after the war. And one time I broke out the Navy. When I went aboard the Mackerel, they gave me a little pay book, said what I was getting and this and that, and it was to keep a record. Well, I projected that back to when I came in the Navy, and then I just kept a good record of me, and I'm in our bedroom when I break that look, and I look at that book, and he said, what do you got there? What are you studying? And I said, this is my Navy pay book. Pay book? What are you talking about? I just handed it to him. So he gets that book, he starts figuring, And he says, you know something? I come out 2 rates higher than you in the Navy, and I was in the Navy a whole year more than you. And you and I made about the same amount of money while we was in the Navy. And I said, yeah, but you were in Airedale. But see, he didn't fly. He just, he worked on it. He worked on guns, But I don't know whether you know it, but in the Navy, I'm going to use the term regular Navy, because we didn't, our submarine sailors didn't think we were a regular Navy. The regular Navy ate on 65 cents a day, and we ate on 95 cents a day. See, so we could eat better than the regular Navy.
That's 95 cents a day per person.
Per person, yes.
Wow.
But hey, but you know what I didn't like? You go on leave. You go on leave, and they give you 65 cents a day to eat on.
So you'd eat better if you just stayed on the boat, huh?
Yeah. Well, no, not necessarily.
Well, we're virtually out of tape now, so
Okay.
I guess I just want to thank you for your service, of course,
Yeah.
to the country, and for letting us do the interview today at your
Yeah.
house.
When you